If you're anything like me, your brain sometimes needs a break, and ADHD brains are like this. Our executive functions in our minds get a bit more overwhelmed in a neurotypical world. If we all just lived in a world of ADHD people, our brains wouldn't get overwhelmed because the world wouldn't work like that. Until we'd never get anything done, but let's leave that alone. What do you do when your brain needs a bit of a break? If you're in between meetings and you're sat there going, I feel really exhausted after that meeting. I feel really exhausted after that conversation. What do I do now? Well, let's start with the why. Why does that really even happen? Well, think of it like this. Your executive function is kind of like a muscle that you might use and work out at the gym. So you might be doing arm day, for example. And you know that if you do arm day 2 days on the run, 3 days on the run, or every hour, that muscle can become burned out. It's exactly the same thing with the executive functions that we have in our mind. They can become a bit burned out. Now, it's temporary. You can rest and relax and let things calm down, but your brain kind of runs hot and you need to let it have those breaks. Otherwise, it just becomes a jumbled mess of fog and confusion. How do you let your brain rest? Well, it's kind of simple. You do something which is easy for your brain. Now, this might be counterintuitive for some people. So you might go and do some, I don't know, imagining about space-time dimensions, which is actually something that I do. Or you might go and do something which is comfortable, like having a conversation, a friendly chat, as opposed to something that requires too much actual thinking and planning and deciding. So let's say you come out of that meeting now. So you've been in this meeting for maybe an hour, you've had to make 3 or 4 decisions, you've had to plan some stuff. What do you do? Well, if you're in work, you need to go and find a little space where you can have some time away and take a break. This might be something as simple as just staring out of a window for a short while. One of my employees in the past actually requested that. And I immediately said yes, because I understood that it was important. This comes under the banner of reasonable accommodations. Allowing people the space they need to look after themselves is kind of a normal part of work, I would suggest. But what if your boss says no? Well, okay, you kind of can't say no to a coffee break though, can they? Or a quick walk to the water cooler. So find ways around these situations. Now, what if it's your own business? Well, you get to choose to make the rules. You choose. But what's really common with entrepreneurs is that we feel this general, I should be neurotypical, this desire to be able to work harder than everyone else and keep going when, maybe we can't. It's important to take a different approach at these times and to allow your brain the time it needs. You are correct when you recognize your brain needs a break. You're not wrong. You're not trying hard enough. You are correct that your brain needs a break in the same way as your muscle needed a break when you were at the gym. So what happens then if you have back-to-back meetings? How do you handle this? Well, it becomes a little bit more tricky. The best thing you can do is ensure that you never have back-to-back meetings. That's the number one rule. A boundary would be to say, I don't do back-to-back meetings. I need to prepare for meetings. That could be something that you say, to make sure that you get that break in between. Even if you've not told people you're ADHD yet, you can deal with it at the level of traits. No one's going to tell you your brain is wrong. If you need that time to prepare, companies should be willing to allow you that time to prepare. Again, if it's your own company, you get to say, you get to choose, you get to allow yourself that kind of break. You don't have to force yourself through to exhaustion and brain fog, because that does nobody any good. And this is really the key point. You're trying your best to optimize your brain, to do the things that are beneficial, really important for your business or the business that you're working for. This isn't about you trying to get out of doing something. This is about you actually trying to help the world around you. You're doing your best to be productive. Now, a lot of people who come to me will start to say things like, yeah, but if I could just try a bit harder, if I could find a method. Well, okay, let's have a look at that for a second. And let's have a look at finding a new method. How could you improve the situation? Well, you could reduce the cognitive load within meetings. That is something you can do. You could, I don't know, go into the meeting with an AI system which helps you to make sense of things and to plan and make decisions, and just say, oh, do you know, I like to use AI to work some things out with me. That might reduce the amount of load that it really takes on your brain. If you're having to make decisions, you could pop those decisions into a tool and kind of get going with those decisions without it taking quite so much load on your own brain. There's even some tools coming out that you can record your meeting as you're going along and ask it questions. So these tools are all starting to become available to make it easier for ADHD people to actually be productive and to work when you, quote, should be working. They'll help you to just deal with some of the exhaustion that your brain might be feeling at times. Now, what if you don't have access to any tools, or you're in a meeting that's too confidential to do that? Well, think of it from the perspective of your executive functions. You have 12 executive functions. They're things like attention and planning, prioritization, goal-directed action. These things are harder for our brain. They just take more processing for us than they would do for neurotypical people. So minimize those in the meeting. Write some notes up and say you'll do your thinking outside of the meeting. You don't have to do it there and then. And if people push back and say, we need an answer, say, well, I'll give you an answer in about 2 hours. There's very few meetings that can't wait for an answer a couple of hours. And if people continue to push on that, just remind them that this is an important part of your brain and who you are. Thinking time should never be a bad thing when it comes to businesses. So this whole thing really is about reasonable accommodations, giving yourself boundaries, giving yourself permission to push back on things that frankly don't suit who you are. Allow yourself the space to become productive in a way that suits your brain. See you in the next video.